Here I am. How do you like my new trans human look? I'm Jordy from the Enterprise. This is my visor. Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you out there, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Alban. Hi, I'm your Sensei, and I'm here to tell you a story. I'm your great, and don't believe a word I say. And all of you snowflakes, you should leave right now. Right? Anybody who is siloed in their belief, who doesn't want to have an open mind or think of something that they never thought of before. That's why you come to Dreamy Dreamland, to think about things you never thought about before. And, where you are, I keep saying, the 18th of May was my fourth anniversary. I've been doing this for 4 years. And for the last 2.5, 3 years, I've been going on about the big splat, the great splat, right? And pretty much you look at the United States, we've gone through a big splat, every 10 to 20 years, We had the Civil War, and then we had the Indian Wars, and then we had the Mexican War, and then we had the Spanish-American War, and then we had the First World War, and then the Second World War, and then Korea, and then we had Vietnam, and then we had Desert Storm in 91, and then 9/11, and intermingled with that there were economic collapses. There was the Great Depression of 29 that lasted until 50 something, when the great industrial might of America that was built up during World War II, was let loose on the commercial side and brought things to the whole world. And we had an extraordinary economic boom, probably from 47 till 50 until 72, right? Or actually 70, 69, somewhere around there. And then, see, these booms and busts just don't happen like that, right? They are a curve, right? And it's, I've been going on about Vlad in Russia and whether he's reading the script or whether someone's flipped the switch. Because what happened in the early 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed and all of the Eastern Bloc kind of freed itself and became basically joined in the EU and became part of NATO. I mean, even though George J. said, "Oh, not 1 inch," Gorbachev didn't get it in writing, and so we just rolled right over them. What are they going to do, right? We had caused collapse of everything that was pinning them up, and they had no real market dynamic, no real anything. And that's what we're seeing in the United States right now. There is no market dynamic, inflation occurred because for 2 years or longer, the American people were given a chunk of change and they spent it on stuff and it went like this, right? And then we had those, supply chain disruptions and that took out certain things of our economy. And what this is doing is getting us ready to be AI, getting us ready at all of our jobs that, we're going to bring them back to America. We're going to make all that stuff that's being made in China now here, right? And it's not going to happen. All of that, manufacturing will come back, but it will come back being done by robots, right? And China being the next big, no, not really. It's going to be the Willy Loman of world economies, And you see that this whole thing has been around since Gilgamesh. And I've been reading Gilgamesh over, so I have my copy of my translation from ancient into Hebrew, Hebrew into Greek, Greek into Latin, and then Latin into German. And so, and the Hebrew and the German are really interesting. And so all those languages that it's a translation of, it's really interesting because Gilgamesh is a story of human culture, right? The strong man, the king. And if we go look at the Torah, the Old Testament, and go look at kings, and there were like 900 kings that each lasted somewhere between 3 and 20,000 years. They lived that way, right? So something happened to the human being. And I think we were something different back in those days. We weren't Homo sapiens sapien per se. And Homo sapiens sapien, I think, was a manufactured element of what, because there is no missing link. There is pre-hominin, pre-Homo sapiens sapiens, the caveman, and the Neolithic guy, and they were, they had cave paintings, they had poetry and theater, and they were quite more evolved than we are. So, all of this was supposed to come to culmination in 2050, and they're rushing it because there were certain things. Back in the day when I was at the United Nations, I went to a conference called Alternative 3. And out of that came a English TV show that was shown once, and that was it, right? And then someone wrote a book about it called Alternative 3, and it basically said that the planet Earth goes through these cycles of weather, right? And they're long ones. Now, there are short blips, in it, and that's what we're experiencing right now of the global changing, right? And forget about it being, the planet's going to burn up. It's going to freeze. And if you were to go see Whitley Strieber and Art Bell's movie, first their book, and then their movie called The Day After Tomorrow, it showed that everything was like, the movie opens with seeing this girl out there in this green grass and a little yellow flower, and then the thing comes back and bingo, she's, surrounded by snow, and she's like on the, South Pole, and these other guys are on the North Pole taking core samples, and all of a sudden, this gigantic ice shelf just cracks right off and floats away, and those people come back and try to, hey, something really bad's happening. We better look at this. This is not going to be good. And, there's a guy who is just like, he's not the president. He's either vice president or someone, above the president. And he looks just like Dick Cheney. He goes, no. We have to keep drilling oil. We have to keep doing this. We have to keep doing that. Blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, these amazing storms go across the world. There's tornadoes everywhere, and hurricanes and rain, and things burning up all around the world. And then the sea, because it's gotten so warm, all of that ice has melted like that. And instead of taking 300 years for it to raise 2 feet, it raises like 40 feet, in less than, a week. And then it starts to get cold because all that fresh water comes into the Atlantic, and there's this thing called the African train, where it takes all the warm water from Africa, takes it around South America, around through the Gulf of Mexico, and then up the East Coast and over to Europe. And without this, Ireland, England, Russia, you name it, would be just one gigantic frozen ice cube year round. And that's what happens like that. And everything in the northern hemisphere freezes like solid, and everything in the southern hemisphere, and we've been treating the southern hemisphere like crap for the last 100 years. And now our lives are going to depend on it. We're not allowing any South Americans to south of the border to come into America. And big, what happens when Americans can't live in America? They got to go to South America. Mm. So anyway, that's just one thing to think about. Of course, no one's watching. And what's going on? So they're rushing what they want to have happen geopolitically for the whole planet. Mr. Global taking over. And so this war with Russia, and it was meant to, like it's just on the script, everything. And like when Jojo, the used car salesman, was in Japan, and someone asked him, so yeah, well, we're not going to physically attack Russia, but if China goes after Taiwan, well, we're going to go in and attack, right? Because we have an overpowering military force, right? And even though on paper, China's the second biggest economy per capita, their GDP is like nothing. It takes 7 of them to equal 1 American GDP person, right? And same with Japan. Japan's a killer country. It's like no one wants to mess with Japan because they have this defense force that would eat you alive, and it has a reach of 2,000 miles all the way around that island, right? So. And we have about 100,000 Marines on Okinawa. So it's shaping up for one interesting battle, because what's going to happen is Russia's going to fall apart. And, that's what caused the Russian Revolution. They were in World War I, and the war wasn't over, but Russia responded so poorly that they were, embarrassed. So they stepped out of Japan, ate them alive on their coast in the Pacific. And they stepped out of the war, and then the English brought in Marx and Engels? The guys who precipitated Lenin and Trotsky, who precipitated the Russian Revolution, but only in 7 cities. It wasn't until Joe Stalin, who killed, 60 million people to get everyone in line, that the Russian Empire became, and we helped them. We developed their oil, we developed their minerals, we developed everything for them. Mr. Arm and Hammer, Mr. Coke, you name it. This stuff is right in front of us, right? So what's going to happen is Russia will collapse, right? Once the people really realize how they've been, cheated, lied, they're not going to be happy. And so the thing with Russia is that there's 58 different racial groups that don't see themselves as Russians. They see themselves as Kazakhstanis or whatever. And they're going to revolt. And they all have weapons. They all have tanks and guns, and lots of them have nuclear weapons. That's going to be the real interesting thing. Russia has 6,600, workable, ready to be deployed nuclear weapons. And it has about 3,000 to 5,000 on top of missiles ready to go. And they're all over Russia, right? So all those little places that have nuclear away from Russia itself. And Russia just keeps going in on itself. And, so what'll happen, the UN will have to become a military entity and attack all those countries. Those countries don't cough up their nuclear weapons, just like Ukraine did. Ukraine had a lot of nuclear weapons, but see, the nuclear weapons are controlled in those countries. Command and control is back to Moscow. So, but you could still take that missile apart and have the physical material, still have the nuclear weapons, still have a missile that you could, easily back engineer. So there are a lot of things that could be done. But we offered Ukraine and Russia a lot of money to, and Russia didn't have to give up those missiles in the Ukraine. They just brought them back into Russia. And the Kazakhstan and a few other stands where they had missiles, they did the same. That's not going to happen this time, because everyone's going to see, if Ukraine had kept their nuclear missiles and re-engineered them, they could have threatened Russia with nuclear weapons, right? So, and look what, Ukraine's doing to the Russian army with nickel and dime weapons. So the real interesting thing is, um, why Russia that has an amazing, like millions of guys under, has way, larger, superior, stronger, more tanks, more. I mean, they have, you know, they are the only people flying in the sky, yet they do not have air superiority. The Ukrainians are knocking aircraft out of the sky with stingers. So we are looking at, and this war is just going to draw on longer and longer. And plus, and Russia has probably lost somewhere between 10 and 40,000 people. Probably have somewhere between 60 to 100,000 severely injured soldiers, and lost a lot of material. Those pictures, I have these guys who are call themselves scholastic. I spoke to Senator Larry just yesterday. Who cares? Senator Larry doesn't know crap. He's the best legislature Virginia can buy. So it's like, good luck, gang. Where are we going with any of this? We're going to, Mr. Global and his funhouse. And now I'm dressed for it. I'm already getting to be transhuman, and I have the skill set to live like a millionaire on $400. Right now I am. First of all, I have to thank um, you guys for continue to put stuff in PayPal. It's always just being just enough, So it's what it is. So it's been talking now for about 17 minutes. So and you got to realize that COVID, 19 was SARS 2. Not SARS 1 was scary, man. SARS 1 would have gotten out. It would have killed billions, right? And so whoever did this, or whatever throw the dice did this, no big deal. Now we're having monkey blisters, and meaning viruses. The more we go into where we're not supposed to go, meaning other animals' habitat, the more this is going to happen. You look at those islands that were all just beautiful, beautiful forests as far as you could see, and with the lungs, breathing in more carbon dioxide than the rainforests of Brazil, and now they're palm farms. And when that deal was made 20 years ago, the indigenous people who had the legal right to that land, the government made a deal with the corporations to give 20% of the profit to the indigenous people, and all the indigenous people have gotten was dying of lead poisoning, being shot. So I was in Australia when I was sent out to live with a tribe called the Wallamachery. There were 900 of them, and right below Ayers Rock, and they were contemplative keepers of the spirit of that neck of the woods, and the Nukunba. And the wife is, oh, they're really stupid, they're really dumb, they're like children. They won't let you take their picture, and oh, they have no written language, no nothing, they're lazy, blah, blah, blah. No. They did have a written language, they just never showed it to the white people. They let me take pictures because Polaroid gave me 20 SX7s. They were just coming out, the Star Trek, it was flat, thin, and it folded out. And it's a great little camera. Too bad it got taken over by digital crap, your smartphone. So anyway, and the image would pop out of the camera like magic, and it'd be a gray square, and then the picture would come out and be total saturated colors. So I gave there were only 9 of the 900 left, and I gave everyone their own Polaroid SX70, and I gave them each 3 packs of film. I showed them how to use it, and they went around and took pictures of everything, and they were great. I mean, and then they let me take pictures of everything. And one day I said, the morons in Adelaide, who would be quote unquote experts on these people, said that you wouldn't let me take pictures because you said it was going to steal your soul. I said, well, that's stupid. No, we didn't let them take our pictures because they're assholes. We like you. We knew you were coming. We knew you were coming before you showed up. So that is the world, and so I'm getting towards the end of my warranty, and I'm just out in the woods. There is, it's really nice. The rich people are there, but they're not making as much noise as they were earlier on, and I think they're getting, they're going away. They're getting bored. There's, nothing for them to do except steal people's property and destroy it and build gigantic houses on it, and then launder the ill-gotten gains. I mean, everything that's happening around me is straight up mobster laundering money, right? So, I mean, just like go look at a nice little town, all those little towns in the corner of North Carolina near Boone and, Grand Fox Mountain, Elk Smith, not Elk Smith, Banner Elk. There's about 4 or 5 of these little teeny towns that just got exploded, and condos everywhere. And Banner Elk has they put 20-story concrete skyscrapers on top of the mountains there, and made them so everyone's living in apartments, looking out over these mountain ranges, and instead of building really expensive houses, they gave them all shoeboxes to live in. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at Stack and Path. Steven Spielberg's film Player One. It's like, this is what everyone's going to be wearing one of these things and living in a VR world, virtual reality. We already are. We're just, and everyone is. So the United States they don't realize they're in the third world. My brothers and sisters and other people think they're rich. They got all of this stuff, and they're getting sick from all kinds of this, addiction to stuff. That's what they're addicted to. That's what they got. My sister's kids. She had 5 kids. Each of them, let's see, one had 8, one had 4, one had 6. So she has a lot of grandchildren. And all of them have some kind of thing, gender issues, HHD or ARD or whatever, a lot of alphabet soup. And those kids are going to we are going to have what is known as the eugenics war. Gene Roddenberry, his looking at what was down the pike for the human race back in 1968, he was spot on, And so that's kind of what we are looking at, because all these people who, everybody who's not white and can't be manipulated by being just white supremacists. And above them, there's going to be people who will have become transhuman and eugenic, meaning they'll be engineered to be superior. They will be the race the National Socialist Party was looking for. The Ubermensch. And so if you read, Adolf Hitler didn't write Mein Kampf or the second one. It was Mein Kampf 1 and 2. Those were straight up blueprints of Mr. Global, and he's saying, this is what we're going to do. It's going to take a while, but in Germany, forget Germany, it's that movement of nationalist socialism, fascism, that's what we are portraying here, and that's what we're seeing right here in America, right? And so first thing we had to take out is Russia, because they have all these resources, in all these different places. All Poland has to do is move up into those resources, and they're not going to have to be begging for gas anymore, right? They're going to have all NATO's weapons to go do it, and Russia will be torn apart by this war. This war ain't ending anytime soon. The only time this war in Ukraine ends is when the Ukrainian people realize they've been had and they stop fighting. Meaning, if the Ukrainian folk had been so easily manipulated. If they had just let the Russians just come in and then just said no, let the Russians come in, let them take everything over and try to run it and have the Ukrainian go, no, we're going to go to the beach. See ya. Good luck. We're not going to work. We got enough canned stuff. If everyone had just stocked up and then went on a diet, and then invited, the media in big time, had to have all of the world media meeting the Russians, there'd be no soldiers out there, all the Ukrainians be on the beach. It would just be guys in flak jackets with press and no weapons and just cameras, and the Russians, and then the Russians are there, and then there's no government, there's no nothing, there's no police, there's the Ukrainians have lived without electricity before. So they just turned it off. They shut all those reactors down and put them in safety lock, And then what would that do? That would have been the end of war. That would have shown the falsity of war. But they were, the Ukrainians are people who are, I grew up in New York City, 2nd Avenue, every 3 blocks was different nationality. Down the Lower East Side was all Ukrainian. Oh, there's everybody down the Lower East Side. Italians, Jews, Chinese, Ukrainians, a lot of Ukrainians. From 9th up to 16th Street, over to Avenue Z, there was every different flavor of Baltic folk. And when Russia fell apart in the early 90s and the mob came to New York, the Russian mob made the Ukrainian mob, the Russian mob looked like Girl Scouts compared to the Ukrainian mob, and they had been there a long time. So, and the Italians and everybody else knew not, the Irish, the Jews knew not to mess with the Ukrainians, right? And so, when I was a little kid, I had a couple of buddies who were Ukrainian, and they were the nicest, sweetest people. They give you the shirt off their back. You piss them off, they would kill everyone. They would take it to the ground, And so, that's what the Russians are looking at. And you'd think that the Russians would realize that because Ukrainians are like their cousins. They've been involved with them for at least 200 years within the construct of everything. So, Vlad should have known going into Ukraine would be the kiss of death for his Russia. Right? He will be remembered as the person who destroyed Russia. Right? And he will get a bad rap all through history. And he has been getting a bad rap since a little kid. He was like genetically engineered to be the loser of this war, right? And all the oligarchs who came behind him, like 6 of them have been knocked off already, right? The generals that supported him have been, 12 of them have been knocked off already. Who knows really what's going on the ground? But it's definitely not an easy go for Russia, right? And so we have dumped $250 billion worth of weapons. Just the United States has dumped $250 billion with a T of weapons into the Ukraine. And, boy, Lockheed, Roman Aerospace, everyone's like going like this, because we had to make up that came from our stores, The T-177, the 777 Howard's light, maneuverable, and accurate within 4 meters. It can shoot a shell 25 kilometers and hit its target within 4 meters. Anything close to what Russians have, they can shoot a shell 10 kilometers and get within a kilometer of its target. That's why, they were going after, some military factory over here, and they blew up the hotel and the high-rise apartment building and the school and the hospital, and not on purpose, just because they are that incompetent. And their army, they just took conscripts from everywhere, told them that they're going to go fight the Nazis, and threw them in there, and that all these young kids came up against were old folk, right? because they're the only ones who couldn't get out of the way. And that's why so many were found dead in the street, because these kids had guns in their hands. They had no real responsibility. They had no backing. There was no command. They were thrown out there. They weren't had anything to, they had to, steal from the supermarkets. They had no gas. They were like, and then the Ukrainians were coming to go get them. And so, and the Ukrainians let the Russians go deep into the Ukraine, knowing that their supply lines, they could cut them, which they did. They just cut them, and then everything stopped. And then they attacked from both sides, and from the middle, and from here, and from there, and they could do that as long as they were in a part of the Ukraine where there was forests and cities and things that they could hide, and just take pot shots at the Russians that were all lined up. You blow the front tank up and the back tank, and then the other 20 tanks in between are sitting ducks, And that's what they did. They had a strategy. They had been planning this out for at least 4 years. The U.S., Delta Force and people like that were in there training them. They had moved enough javelins and stingers and other pieces of equipment to, slow the Russians, if not stop them, and then put up a big fuss. And thus, we sent, like I said, we sent $250 billion in 3 months of hardware. And NATO probably threw it in another, tenth of a trillion of their hardware, and they're still dumping tons of hardware in there. And the Russians blew up a lot of train stuff and a lot of roads, but they've been pushed back to Dumas, and so they're clearing away all that stuff and shipping stuff on rail. And the thing about blowing up a railroad is, yes, you can drop a bomb, blow up, a piece of track, but you can't blow up the whole track. That takes a lot. And so, does this not look any better? I don't know. Anyway, it's been 32 minutes.
So what I'm saying is that Ukrainians, a lot of
Rambling Jack Elliott. I'm Nick Forster. Let's see a little of this.
The eye doctor said it was not a problem with the eyes, but
forensically looking at all this stuff, that's what I'm hearing is that both sides have done.
The eye doctor said it was.
If I've been able to watch the United States arm and train 100,000 soldiers, special operative class in the Ukraine, I can't believe Russia didn't. And I knew when he had the guys up on the border, they already had enough stingers and anti to give them a hard time. And now we have dumped close to almost $500 billion of weapons in there in less, since February. Real, and we can't even the Congress took out $200 and something billion for COVID-19, meaning they had gotten companies to make in this country and test kits and all that kind of stuff. They had got a nice.
Let me make a point on that on the PPE. You didn't hear NPR today on the guy. Some guy who started up down in Texas or somewhere there who had this idea and he started making masks and put it together and he was making $1 million a day.
Right.
What blows my mind
He never
is
listens.
that the administration did not
He
use
says I talk all the time.
the defense
And then I
authorization
never make
bill.
a point.
Yep, he could have.
And I never
Wait a
make
minute,
any
God
sense.
damn it.
Yeah, God damn it! What?
Well, why are you cutting me off?
I'm talking. I'm not cutting you off.
No, you were cutting me off.
Okay, I'm
I was
cutting you
making
off.
a point.
Okay, make the point.
I'm just saying I don't understand why you must want to talk.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep, pretty much.
Come on, make the point, buddy. Make the point. Make the point. Make the point. Make the point.
That we should have gotten masks in the mail. Everybody should have been given masks. It should have been the highest
right.
priority
Donald Trump didn't do it.
of the
Donald
federal
Trump's a
government in
chump.
the pandemic
Donald Trump is a
to
friggin'
have masks,
moron.
quality
Donald Trump
masks
has some
made and
attention span
distributed to
less
all
than
people.
So what's your point?
go.
We
Yeah,
didn't do it.
So what's your point?
So what's your point?
That's peculiar.
What's your
What's
point?
the point?
That it is peculiar.
So what's peculiar about it? Make the
Why
point.
didn't we do it? How do you explain that common sense thing didn't occur?
Well,
It was.
can I speak now?
Fuck you. Go ahead, man. I mean, if you don't know when I've stopped talking or when I'm talking, you got a problem.
Okay, so the whole representation.
And it's insulting to hear that, by the way, but
Okay.
I'll take it. Go ahead.
So the whole expose
I'm so
of
intimidated.
how our government and our elected officials, they made every wrong decision they could have made from day one. It was totally unbelievable to have that level of incompetence, right? And then when we switched from the Republican to the Democrat, it was like there was no friggin' difference on the level of incompetence.
And what do you think they should have been doing that would have indicated to you they were being competent?
Right off the bat, what they should have done is when the World Health Organization said, hey, there's a problem here, basically that was when good old Donald Trump closed up shop on this entity within the State Department and the CDC that connected them to the World Health Organization, and everyone shared information. And right when we should have been really sharing the most information, he closed that down and closed down other things that had storerooms of stuff waiting for a pandemic. He closed that within weeks of it being told to him this was a problem. They said, it's a cold. And he didn't really, it didn't come out in the news. No one talked. I'm talking about December. I'm talking about when the first real knowledge of this was when every military in a country had a military kind of Olympics in China, in the town where this thing started from, right? Mahun, right? And they had like America had 100 athletes in China and Russia and Italy and you name it. They all had military people. Was there right at, and people were getting sick, and nothing was said about it. And those folks were right in the middle of ground zero, exposed. And he got word of this, and he said, no big deal. He should have had those guys quarantined, period, right? Then you study those guys. You got lab rats right there. You can see them, right? And there were, the WHO had isolated a strain because it's just like SARS-1. that was around 4 years ago. The lucky thing, it's not as deadly as SARS-1. And so they had it all, and they had the, hey, look at this. And he just closed it all freaking down. Donald did, right? And then people started to get sick, and he didn't do anything.
Why were not senators raising Cain?
No one gave them, they had to have been at least somewhat observant. They needed to be, I got this information from Cliff Hyde. He was really great at the very beginning. He's still great, but he's no longer there. He's had to push himself into, a number of people have had to push themselves into Patreon. They were, their algorithm was, cut down on YouTube. But anyway, the information wasn't there. So unless you were really looking at something, unless you were in someone's feed, unless that was something that was one of my usual things I looked for, and they weren't, because Donald Trump got rid of the entity that should have been doing that. That was connected to.
I hear you. What you're saying is he didn't cooperate with the World Health Organization
whatsoever.
He turned his back on information.
Yep.
The point I'm making is I agree with you, and that's probably a good explanation. But what I don't understand is why there were no voices that were objecting to that.
Because our legislator is the best money can buy. They don't do anything that could put them in a position that might not get them elected next time. So that this was a new thing. They had no idea about it. They didn't.
But there's some that would have logically thought it might help them get elected.
Yes, and they didn't even go there. Not until much, much, much later. So.
Okay, well, you don't really know.
Basically, I think everyone was scared of Donald Trump. He was leading the way.
All right, so that's okay. So Trump didn't take it serious at the beginning. That's a big mistake.
Right. And not only that, he doesn't like to be told stuff. So he didn't. There was a point where I don't know this. I wasn't there, but he, most presidents get up early in the morning and have that, the military guys come in and tell them what has happened while he was asleep, right? This occurred, that occurred. And Donald Trump said, I don't want to hear that. And so he didn't.
That reminds me of, just today I heard a guy talking about, I think it was Lewis Lapham. Anyway, he was talking about Kissinger. By the way, Lewis Lapham, if you see an email from me with Lewis Lapham, and make sure you check it out, because he does a very easy, nice job of explaining the court, which is essentially the script of the court that you always talk about, and how it works in the power game and the social game, political game, how that all melds and works, and he describes it very well.
That's good.
But anyway, he was, let's see, what was the point I was going to make about Kissinger?
Oh, let's see. We were talking about Donald Trump, the COVID thing, how it's been totally terribly mishandled by everybody.
But maybe it'll come to me, but there was another point that came up. He mentioned James Baker. I met James, but James Baker was testifying before a committee.
Which one?
One of the congressional committees.
What were they looking at?
Baker, it was foreign policy stuff. You want to talk?
No, I just want to know.
Well, just let me tell you the story.
Okay.
James Baker was in front of a committee, and when he came out in the hallway, I handed him a letter. And he nodded to me, put it in his coat pocket, and kept going. In the letter, I was recommending that the administration withhold an equal amount of money from Israel that Israel was spending on the settlements. And he ended up doing that.
And that's what this guy always says.
So how does that connect to COVID and Donald Trump?
What's that?
I said, how does that connect to COVID and Donald Trump?
The way it's connected was we were talking about, I was telling you about Lewis Lapham, and actually forgot to connect. That's the part that I forgot, but I just was telling you
This guy's a
side
scholastic.
story.
He
You
believes in
mentioned James Baker a
textbooks.
little earlier in the
Yeah,
He believes in like giving
and I
James
just thought
Baker
about
away.
him today, and I remember, you don't think it's an interesting story that Baker took my suggestion and made a foreign policy move? Do you think that's worthy of making a point?
Do you know for sure that that was the reason, or did other people within the government have that same suggestion?
I had not heard it before. I do not know. It's like you think I'm something.
No, I don't.
Like I'm bullshitting you.
No,
I'm telling you, I gave him a letter that made this suggestion as
And
a
we were
policy
talking about
move.
COVID.
Yeah.
I can't say whether he did it based on my letter or not. What the fuck is your problem?
No.
Why are you asking me that? You know I don't know that.
Right.
Okay, well, you impudent bastard.
You don't know me too well, do
It
you?
It's worthy. It doesn't have to.
Okay.
I think he was talking about Kissinger,
Mm-hmm.
and see if I can get this straight. Too much wine here, I think.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Here's the deal.
Okay.
Kissinger is talking to the head of Gazprom,
Mm-hmm.
Russian biggest company,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
during the time of the Chechen War.
Right.
And Russia was publishing videos that the Chechnya rebels were producing.
Right.
And Kissinger says, what? You're actually showing videos on your television of what your enemy's doing? And Gazprom guy's position was, well, I thought that's what you guys do. And Kissinger had to straighten him out and say, no, it just appears that way. But this guy wanted to be like America.
Right.
Don't you guys do that? So we did it.
Right.
And I think that's an instructive way of how things work, of how minds work, of how things come together. And it's just part of the mix of how complicated things are. And so therefore you can't, this idea of a script that you're constantly talking about, or the heavy hand, has to be mitigated because it's partially accurate only. So that's my point. And that's how it ties into the Trump deal.
Well, it's going to be interesting because the unexpected, at least the unadvertised consequences of this. I would say this time next year, 1 billion people will have starved to death.
And a few million will be in
Between
America.
the-
2 million Americans are going to starve to death
What do you
by
think
this
is
time.
likely to happen on the diplomatic front on this war? What are you looking for?
Well, basically, follow the money. The people making the deal on this want this war to last as long as it can last, right? So,
Well, they've already got their orders in, and they keep going for a couple years already.
so a couple of years.
They don't need additional.
They
do
need, actually they don't. I mean, like I said, before the Russians crossed the line, they had enough Stingers and anti-tank missiles to slow them down, give them a hard time. And I can't believe the Russians were not expecting that. But that's number one. Number two is we have just said.
Let me make sure I'm understanding this. You're saying that they already had Stingers and
Yep.
and they were well armed already.
They were well armed and well trained, meaning.
And you're saying, of course, the Russians knew that.
I'm saying I'm surprised they didn't. I didn't say, of course. I don't know.
I think they obviously did.
So why did they?
One thing that the Russians have, there are an awful lot of Ukrainians that are pro-Russian. They have to keep their head down But the Russians have no problem with intelligence on Ukraine. They're very good at the intelligence
And
on
this was
Ukraine.
2 weeks ago.
So for sure they knew what the U.S. military was up to in Ukraine. And the weapons that were in the hands of the Ukrainians, they knew for sure.
Then why were they so bloodied by the response?
Well, there's a question of because they didn't come, because they came in expecting Ukrainians to fold,
And they didn't.
and they didn't.
And so they
misjudged it.
so they just kept coming to go to the capital. They could have stopped, and regrouped, and
So what are you saying about going to the Capitol?
well, they kept coming. They went on to they.
I think it's almost universally accepted by military analysts that was a feint at the Capitol. That was tying down troops, forcing Ukraine to defend their capital at all cost and monopolizing a good portion of their forces. Because they only sent in 40,000 men, and it was impossible to take a city of 4 million or whatever, to 2 million, whatever. That it was a given. But Ukraine had to respond to it because if they didn't, then it could have been possible. Then they were in danger.
So while they were doing that,
Russia did, and beat this down if you can. I'm saying that Russia had no intentions of taking the capital.
so while they were doing that feign, how come they did not, come where they were planning to go to, the Donbass and that land bridge? How come they didn't just, go? Why aren't they successful by now? If they had this really brilliant strategy of doing a feign to tie down Ukraine's military, how come they're overpowering resources towards their own country? What have not been amazingly superior and won the day? And how come they had to blow up Mariupol to a point where it's like dust, and yet the guys are still, sticking it to them from the steel mill?
Well, that's a couple of different questions there. One is why were they not more successful?
Right. If their brilliant strategy of tying down the Ukrainian army was so brilliant.
Well, I didn't say it was so brilliant. I'm just saying that's what their motive was.
Okay.
So I didn't say it was brilliant. I just said they were not trying to take the capital.
Well,
that's all I'm saying.
They got pretty close to it, and why are they still blowing shit up everywhere?
Well, there's two aspects of that. One is they said, let's have a stand down here. We don't want to destroy you. It would be foolish to do so. So let's stop here.
I never heard them
And
say
they
that.
always got, fuck you. So if you want to be destroyed, we'll destroy you. Besides, by putting your forces where you're placing them, by the way, do you realize that neither you nor I have ever seen military action of the Ukrainian army as 250,000 force, highly trained airplanes, jets, tanks, everything. We've never seen any video of that.
This is true. All we really get to see is some things blown up.
So what I'm saying is that the Ukrainians, a lot of that destruction was done by Ukrainian artillery.
And that's what my sources say too. I said that both Russia and Ukraine are equal in blame for the veracity and destruction of what's going on.
On top of that, the Ukrainians positioned their soldiers in the high rises.
This is where he gets a little conspiratorial.
Well, I haven't heard any.
So, this war is going to go on for years. We were in Afghanistan for 20 years, right? We only lost 4,500 guys. Russia has been in Ukraine now for 4 months, give or take, and they lost close to 30,000. I haven't counted everybody, but from my sources, they saying it's somewhere between 8 and 30,000, could be more, and that there's somewhere between 60 and 100,000 that are seriously wounded, which in a lot of ways take up way more resources than if you were dead. So it's going to be quite interesting. The thing that fell of the Soviet Union was when they went into Afghanistan, and they were there for 10 years and lost close to 70,000 folk, and it was hard to hide all those bodies, right? And in every large city, large numbers of soldiers had died and came from there, and so their moms and dads and grandpas were out, with these pictures of their dead sons, and the military sent the bodies back so the family could bury them. And those families took pictures of their blown up kids in the caskets, not pretty looking, and those were the pictures that they were showing, and that's why Russia isn't doing that. The 120,000 that they sent into Ukraine came from everywhere of the Russian entity, from everywhere. And that's one of the problems is that, so in those 57 different racial, economic dynamics, they're going to have a political blowback from this war, not just the 8 big cities, right? They're trying to spread it around so it can't be followed. Boy, those people, the Russian folk, and every, the special military operation, and lie to. I mean, they've been lied to. They know what lies are. There was a diplomat who was in Europe who just walked away. He left his everything. He said, "I am so, my heart is broken. What we're doing in Ukraine. This is a tragedy. It goes beyond nation states. I can't be part of this. That's it. I'm going." Now, what the backstory, I have no idea. But he walked away. And there have been a couple of people who've gone on national, they closed down all the TV things except the stuff coming out of the Kremlin. And there was a show a couple of nights ago where a very respected general who's retired, they brought him on because he's like, an approved voice. He went on there and they said, "So, what about it?" And he goes, No, you don't understand. This is a catastrophe, military catastrophe. We had this is a level of incompetence you can't imagine. And this is, and Putin is not letting the military do its job. He's micromanaging. He just went on and on and on. And the poor girl who was interviewing him, she was like, meaning her teleprompter had nothing for her to say. So they waited till he was done. They took him off, and he was like, then that was like, 10 o'clock news. Midnight news, he comes back and I say, "Oh, no, what I said was wrong." And you could almost see the gun, at his wife's head, in the back of the audience there. But, that's what I'm saying, kids. Nothing is as what it seems to be. I played that little bit. That guy is a scholastic. That guy is like considered, somebody who the scholastic world, I've got power. I talk to congressmen, I give them letters in the hallway, So it's, and that is the level of competency of our government. Trying to explain why COVID came through. We could have, first thing, taking kids out of school, wrong, because their immune systems are so, there's lots of historical medical evidence that kids don't really get sick. Yes, old guys like me, yes. And did we protect the old folks? No. We took some people who were sick and put them over here and then said, "Oh, no, we had to pull them all together." And that's kind of what took out a good portion of the old people in America, right? The total incompetency. And our medical system is falling apart. People are leaving it. We hardly had enough doctors, nurses, and CAs to do our little medical system when it wasn't being stressed, and now it is. And COVID-19 is nothing compared to what's coming down the line. There's going to be viruses that are really going to kill people. I mean, really kill people. When you mix in starvation, like I'm saying, we're looking at a depopulation of this planet, by billions. This time next year, 1 billion people will be dead from the new, viral aberrant and the starving to death people. Because already, millions, hundreds of millions of people are already food desperate. Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, all over Africa, parts of the United States and Europe. Europe is, mainland Europe is doing better because they have more of a social conscience than the United States does. But look at me. During the pandemic, they gave me $200 of food stamps, and then they cut it back to $47. Could you live on $47? No, I am, because I know what to buy. I bought. There was a bunch of all of those green leafy things. Anything that's being sold at 90 cents a bundle, I buy 10 bundles. That's what I did. That's kind. And then a few months ago, before this all happened in Ukraine, there was a big sale at Walmart's on pasta. And the dollar or the 79-cent box was going for 10 cents a box if you bought 10. I bought $20 worth of pasta. Right? I don't, that'll last me a year and a half, right? And every time I go into any supermarket and the large can of vegetables that has the pop top, that's under 79 cents, I'll buy 10. Because canned food is pretty good. It'll last 3-4 years like brand new. It'll go. I have canned food that I'm eating now that is 6 years, on the shelf. It's been in a cool, dark place in my larder, but every time I have any little money, I buy 10, 20 cans of this, and what's ever on sale of that. And that's how I can live. Healthfully, but I don't buy any processed food. I buy very little meat, eggs and cheese when they're on sale. But eggs used to be 89 cents a dozen, like just 4 months ago. Now, there was a chicken virus, and now, a dozen eggs cost $4. And this, I lived through 1972. I lived, in 1969 and 1966, when I was at Cooper Union, gasoline was 16 cents a gallon in New York City. 1972 was $2. And in 1972 money, that's a lot of money. It's like when I lived in Sweden, the liter of gas was $5. You get around because they had cars that were getting 40 miles a gallon. It was in the 70s. So none of this, nothing is as you think it is. Don't believe a word I say. And listen. And my little conversation with my scholastic friend, I was making sense. He couldn't even put one, and he's a scholastic. I was on a committee that chose the textbook for Texas, and, and he exists because his folks, he comes from generational wealth. Right? His family was a big land-owning family out in Utah and in Virginia. I came from Virginia, went to Utah, and so he's a millionaire. Never worked at, and he's a hardworking guy. I mean, he does got a big plot of land, and he's always I do the same thing, but my plot isn't as big as his, and I'm not moving around gigantic. He's, and he doesn't even sculpt them. He just gets these gigantic multi-ton rocks and moves them around. Hires people and equipment and cranes and puts the rock over there and then the rock over there. And me, I kind of sculpt the deep green, so it'll be happy and healthy, and then I can just let it do its thing, which I'm doing now. Right? So as I was saying, I really have very little financial backing. I have a little pittance of, Social Security, and it's we're already in a economic collapse. You see the stock market, going up and down. It's just people making lots of money because it already is a useless piece of crap, meaning it's already collapsed. And the way it's going up and down, there is no commodity, there is no homeostasis of a balance of what things are worth. It's a bing, 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 bing. And it's just going to get worse. And then, and that's what happened in '08. And that was a scam. Same thing happened in '86 when the savings and loans went down. We had close to 60,000 separate entity banks in America. Now we have 7. That's what '86 was about, buying that all. Now the '08 was about, all of whatever wealth people may have had was in real estate or things of that kind. And then, we, like slicing it up like bologna and selling it off as derivatives, and that went to utilities. Our utility, why are we having these fires in California? Because in Texas, a year, 2 winters ago, everyone in Texas nearly closed down, right? Because their utilities have been so ignored. I mean, they were bought up by Mr. Rothschild, sliced up into derivatives, sold off the stock, and no one's taken care of it. Right? Now, we have 127 nuclear power plants, over 500 megawatts. That should have been closed down in the 70s, but Ronald Reagan signed executive orders saying they can stay open as long as they want. We have the Price-Anderson Act, which protects the utility company to make 16% $16 on the dollar every year that those things, are working. Doesn't cost them anything. The government takes care of it. If it blows up, they're not held legally responsible, and yet they're making $16 on every dollar that's going into. So that's the world America has, and we have just been the Rubik's Cube of this hidden hand's ability to manipulate, and this hidden hand has been around since Mesopotamia. It's been around since Atlantis, Lemuria, Babylon. That is what our story is about. And we don't want to, we keep making up soap operas. Right? And that's what these wars are, these conflicts. They're just soap operas. Millions of people die. And when they die, they're put on the Ferris wheel of chaos, known karma, and pop out someplace else. Now, I'm getting old. And I live in a very nice place. And right now, it's been very pleasant the last few weeks. The rich haven't been around buzzsawing things, bulldozing things, squeezing the nipples of nature, So it's just been me out there, right? Like I said, last evening, I had my door open, and all the animals were on my little porch. I mean, all the birds were lined up. They were just singing along in the rain. And my awning just came over them, so they weren't getting drenched. It was really raining. That's why they were all there. It was really raining hard. And lots of the little critters, squirrels, etc., their little homes are, I live in a very steep area, and I have all the water going into this place. And when it rains a little bit, not a big deal for them. But when it rained probably 3 inches all yesterday, from around 10 a.m. till 10 p.m., and so they were on my deck. And I was listening to classical music and writing my novel. And let's see if I can do this. Okay. So this is what I wrote last night, and this is from my legacies. And it's from what page? 6, right? But this is Act 2. Scene 1, 2A. Chad, Chad, Chad. Love, it is the only thing that is real. The early O's, the new Prometheus. All the promise without no reward. But what is the prize? Love, the immutable. All else is illusion. Can you guess my name? Say it, say it, say it. It is. Say it like it is. Freedom, big bangs. Freedom's big bang comes with a cost, which is you. We must wake up to love's unheard voice. Intellect is more than a diploma. Intellect is the Greek root for knowing by experience. When Double O, that's me, was a boy in Harlem, New York City, in the early 1950s, Double O learned by keeping quiet and listening actively. Double O's elders, listening to Double O's elders, whose challenges were not seen as limitations to be complained as discrimination, to be processed with handouts, but rather seen as opportunities to make oneself better, where the difference were celebrated rather than intimidated into being a Velveeta melting pot. New York City, like most places then and now, is a cosmopolitan salad bowl of culture. Chinatown, Little Italy, Harlem, Spanish Harlem, Black Harlem, Fifth and Second Avenue, East and West, Upper and Lower Sides. The countless others were all religious, socially, culturally separate and diverse communities living on top of each other, where English wasn't the primary language spoken in each neighborhood's education was not only learned from our elders, the correctional institutions of public school was our primary exuberance of the body politic of class operation, opening the doorway to propaganda's opportunity to lie to all our relations. Our teachers were the measure of the good house slave, plantation self-service, and exemplar slavery slave owner. So let's see. Okay. So I wrote another 4 or 5 pages. So that's what my writing looks like. So gang, if you want to, read my novels, go to the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail, and get me. Hey, here I am, and let's see what we can do. I might have to start it because YouTube and Google are like clamping me, and they want me to pay money to be on them now. Well, it's only going to be $2 a month. I mean, I don't have $2 a month. I have such little money in my bank account, and once I lose my bank account for more than 2 weeks, if I don't have something, they close it, and they won't open a new one. So, like right now, I have to wait a week before I really spend any more money. And again, I want to thank all those who do deem it an importance to keep me doing this. No one's chatting. There's one, hi there, AI. So before this summer is over, I would say there's two things going to happen, one or the other. Right? One is by 4th of July, at least by 4th of July, something's going to occur in our solar system. And we're going, what the heck is that? Oh my God, it's an asteroid. It's going to kill us. Ah! Right? Or that big asteroid really is a spaceship. And something that big. You have a lot of guys and gals in it. And so either it will land pretty much quickly, like right before the July, like on the front lawn of it'll put a ship over every one over Paris, Berlin, London, New York, Washington D.C., all across the planet. There will be a presence that'll just be right there, right? And we will try and shoot at it. Man, there'll be a field around it, and stuff will just blow up, and the crap will fall down and kill people. And the shit, we'll say made in Russia, or made in the United States, made in Germany, meaning people will be seeing that their own government's ineptitude will be killing them, which will be a good metaphor for what really is going on. So, so between 4th of July and Halloween, the alien presence will be here, and then it will say, okay, you kids, you are children. We left you here about 12,000 years ago. And we forgot about you, and we came back just to see how you're doing, and you're not doing such a great job. So we're going to reassert our authority because we're your parents. Because they're going to look just like, but really good. They won't be fat. They won't be morbidly obese. They won't be ugly. And they may all be black people. That should be really interesting. It's something, or they'll all be reptiles. You're all reptiles, You just never scrape deep enough to find your scaly self. That's why you have a reptile brain back there, right? So either that, or Mr. Globaloni will assert himself, and we will have a 1984 / Brave New World / any dystopian world you want to, imagine / that's what we'll have. So, that's going to happen relatively soon. I'm going to be way out, I'm kind of, the rich won't come, the rich have done a whole bunch of crap to this neck of the woods, and they won't be able to make it out here, right? And they come, they try to make fun here, and it's like, all they've been doing is driving their motorcycles around the forest, destroying everything, and, it's not that, after you do it for, day after day after day after day after day after day for, couple months, it's kind of boring. And the same thing, and they don't go out in the lake fishing. Only the homeboys do that. The rich people go out there in these big boats and smash them because the lake, is like size of a mountain, so it gets filled up, and the mountain is still there. So they're it's like they think it's like regular, there's like no, it's like 2 football fields here. They see the shoreline here, so they think the boat can, Anyway, so and there's been lots of jet skis, and one jet ski, these guys were playing chicken, and they smashed into each other and burst into flame. And each of them had more people on it than the jet ski. 1 or 2 people each had like 4 or 5, and kids were falling off. And anyway, burst into flame. 6 of them burnt to a crisp. They were on fire in the water. I mean, you can't write this stuff up. And it wasn't covered by anybody. I mean, people are talking about it. Not the rich people, but because it happened in this cove where this road is just 2 stores. I mean, all the stores that used to be around the lake that were for the holler folk have been obliterated. And there's only 2 that got bought up. And now instead of buying stuff that you need, like underpants and socks and shoes and hardware and bacon and eggs and vegetables that these stores used to sell, and everything else, now all they have is 100% death food. Yodels, ring dings, snowballs, popcorn. That's all they got. Period. Zip, zero. And they've taken this place that was really down home, collar joint and turned it into like, Cracker Barrel, corporate, So anyway, that's the story. I'm going to go have breakfast there this week sometime because the breakfast is still pretty good and affordable. But I can get a pretty good breakfast there for under $10. Right? So I'm going to go through the cushions and see if I can scam up $10 and see where I go with that. So anyway, that's my story. I have to go someplace next Tuesday, and I won't really have any money until, middle of next week when the Social Security check comes in. And I'm down to pennies. I'm really down to. I got to. You may not see me. I mean, I can always go to my neighbor. I still have above half a tank of gas. I don't start thinking about where I'm going when I have above half a tank of gas. And I've been able to keep it at 3/4 of a tank in the last week since I last, because gasoline around here does this. So I'm waiting, it got to, last week it's going up to $4.40 to $2.27, and I'm expecting it to drop another dime or so. And I'm going to go to another town that's different and see what that's. So what'd you have for lunch?
So
What'd you have for lunch?
the upset.
Huh, was that good? Yeah, I have their soup. I'm a soup boy myself.
Upset, where's that?
Yeah. Well, if you're a sub guy, I have no teeth. It's hard to,
Sweat. Get some water. There you go. Right? I'll see you then.
Later, buddy. You have a good one. Anyway, so I'm going to say goodbye, and we'll see what happens with the world around us. Okay?